In this video, I'm going to be showcasing and talking about 15 different animals and their skulls. And I would like to start out by saying that fruit bats are carnivores and crocodiles and sharks are not. And the reason is a carnivore has to be a mammal in the order Carnivora, and that means it has carnassial teeth. Now, a skunk is an omnivore, but it still has carnassial teeth, which are these molars in the back, and they're used to slice up and grind the prey or berries, stuff like that. The skulls I have here are a beaver, a porcupine, a muskrat, a raccoon, a bull shark set of jaws, white-tailed deer, American alligator, Indian cobra, coyote, river otter, mink, long-tailed weasel, house mouse, skunk, and Virginia possum. The first skull we're going to look at is the skull of the Indian cobra. Let's see, put it about here. So the first thing you notice is the fangs, which are used to kill its prey, which is usually rats and stuff like that. And then right here you can see the jaws. Jaws aren't attached at the bottom, and that's because they need to stretch wide to open prey that is bigger than its skull. And that's how they swallow things that are much bigger than their own body. Then it has rows of teeth to hold on to its prey, and they're backwards facing to make sure whatever goes in does not come back out. And the eye sockets are towards the front of the head, and very large eyes, which means it's a sight predator, but it can also use its sense of smell, which it picks up scents with its forked tongue. Okay, next, let's look at some of the mustelid family. So, an otter skull, mink skull, long-tailed weasel, and striped skunk. Okay, so they have eyes on the side but also kind of towards the front, and they're predators. Let's see. And they have canine teeth, and the incisors in the front used for grabbing the prey, and then the canines tear it. And then carnassials in the back, which are their premolar and molar teeth, but they're spiked, whereas like human molar teeth are flat. That's because we use those for grinding stuff. These things tear and grind, and they have to be sharp so that they can cut into flesh and stuff like that of their prey. There's the lower jaw. And the long-tailed weasel is one of the smallest predatory mammals, and it is still able to kill things that are 100 times its weight. It can chase down and kill a rabbit, and that's thanks to its teeth that will bite it at either the back of the neck to fracture the spinal cord, or they'll go for the windpipe and suffocate the prey. And otters eat mostly fish, so they have teeth that make sure they can grab onto the prey. They don't want the fish to escape, because fish are slimy and slick, so they can easily slip out of the jaws of some animals. But otters got to make sure that they can't get away, and otters are also really fast. They can chase their prey through the water and on land. And they're really agile animals, extremely smart too. And they're really playful as well. Then the mink, very similar to the otter, just smaller. As with most of the weasel family, they really do look a lot similar. All the skulls are very close to each other. They look almost identical. Now next, the Virginia possum skull. And this one is an omnivore. And here's the carnassial teeth here, spiked, and they're very adapted to chewing up fruits and nuts as well as animal prey. The canine teeth, and then the incisors are very forward facing. They're not sticking back, they're actually going like that instead of like that. And so that's interesting. And then in the very front on the top jaw, it has almost what looks like little fangs. They stick farther forward than the other teeth, which is really interesting. Once again, eye sockets. Eyes are towards the front, somewhat on the side though. Then the other thing about predatory mammals is the sagittal crest. And on this possum you can see it very well. It's very defined. And what this does is this is where the muscle is stored for its lower jaw, which means it has extremely powerful jaw muscles. And all the muscle just runs down here and connects to the jaw, gives it a strong bite force. And next, let's look at a prey animal, such as this white-tailed deer. Skull is much larger than almost all of these other ones. And its teeth are flat and used for grinding, used to eat plants, and they're herbivores. So these teeth are not really that sharp. They're not used for stabbing things as much as gripping and tearing leaves and grass, which that's why they're kind of sharp here. But that's used for grinding up their food. Then eye sockets are on the side of the head, and that they have monocular vision, which means that they see at an angle kind of like that and backwards, sticking out. And that is so that they can see predators at a wider view, whereas most predatory animals have binocular vision, which means their eyes face forward, like with this coyote, and they see mostly what's in front of them, somewhat in the side with peripheral vision. But with a deer, their vision actually, they have very poor depth perception because of the way their eyes are positioned. And they have just enough so that when they run, they don't hit a tree, like big collision that could kill them. But they really have really bad depth perception. But it's just enough so that they can get by and escape predators. The other thing is, it has a big nose, big nasal cavity here. Strong sense of smell. Okay, next, the coyote, which has very long canine teeth. It's a member of the dog family. The front teeth are also the incisors, they're more flat in the front, but they still are good at gripping. And these canine teeth will grab into flesh and tear it. They take pretty big chunks using these teeth. Just stick out kind of like that. Then their carnassial teeth are really huge. You can see that. That's pretty big. Then these are the premolars, which are jagged and sharp as well. And they honestly look kind of like shark teeth, nowhere near as molary as our molar teeth. Has a fairly large brain cavity in this area. Eyes in the front, binocular vision, and a good sense of smell too. Okay, now next is the raccoon, which eats crayfish and fish, stuff like that. Sometimes fruits and stuff. They're omnivores. And so here are their carnassial teeth. More flattened by far compared to the coyote, and that's because they're an omnivore, like I said. So these teeth, here, let me get a side-by-side comparison. So these ones are so much more flat, as you can see, compared to the coyotes. And that's because they don't eat entirely meat. Then they still have large canine teeth, which are used for eating the fish and stuff, and they crush crayfish with their teeth too, and their paws. Incisors, they don't fit together perfectly, at least not in this individual. Then the nose, you can see the nasal cavity in there. Forward facing eyes. Powerful jaws, you can see the sagittal crest here. It's not anywhere near as big as the possums, but it still has pretty strong jaw muscles. You can see that's defined there. Yeah. Then let's look at some more herbivores. So, muskrat skull. So it's basically just very large rat, an aquatic rat. And these teeth, the incisors, never stop growing, as you can see here. They're extremely long. Honestly, these ones are really pointed, but usually they'd be worn down more. And they're used for chewing bark and stuff. They chew on tree bark, stuff like that. Same with beavers and other plant stuff. And then the molars in the back, very flat, and they almost like that's kind of, I don't know, satisfying to look at. They're like perfect. Anyway, the ones in the back are much smaller, ones in the front are bigger, but they're used for crushing and grinding. They don't have canine teeth, and they don't have premolars really, just molars and incisors. And then bigger than the muskrat, we have porcupine, quite a bit bigger. Let's see, there we go. And it actually has quite a bit of a sagittal crest here. It's actually kind of defined. The back of the skull is curved upward. So it has some pretty strong jaw muscles. And they eat bark too. So they spend a lot of their time up in trees, chewing on bark and twigs, stuff like that. And so they have side-facing eyes. They face, honestly, kind of forward though. But the eye goes right about here, in there. Big nasal cavity and large incisors, just like with the muskrat. And they use these to chew on. the bark. And they never stop growing, just like with muskrats, like all rodents. Their teeth keep growing their entire lives, and that's because they wear down when they're eating the foods that they eat, such as bark. And so that's why they keep growing. The orange part is actually much stronger than the white part in the back. And so the white part, that's why it's kind of like a chisel here. The white part wears them way more, whereas the orange part is sharper. And so they keep that sharp and wear it down like that so that they can keep on chewing that bark forever. And then molar teeth, as you can see here. So large molars and incisors, not really any premolars, and definitely no canine teeth. Then we have the American beaver. This is a really large skull. Beavers are pretty big animals, like 4 feet long, counting the tail. And so let's look at these incisors. Yes, very large. As you can see, not even. No animal's perfect. So this one, its teeth are not as sharp here in the back. So the white hasn't worn away as much. It's actually fatter here and not more of a point, such as with that porcupine. Then the front ones are actually shorter than that of a porcupine, at least compared to body size. And eyes facing sideways, but also on the top of the skull. And that's because they swim in the water. And so they have to have their eyes above water to see stuff like that. Molar teeth in the back to chew on bark, which is what they eat. Medium-sized nasal cavity. And pretty large brain cavity. And next, let's look at American alligator jaws. So the interesting thing about alligators and crocodiles is the fact that their jaws don't open very easily. Like, they have a much weaker force of opening their jaws than any other animal. And that's because humans and most mammals will bite down with their bottom jaw moving like that. Whereas a crocodile, the top jaw moves. And it's actually cool to look at if I can get this to work. You can see hinges right here. And that's where this raises and lowers, which is really interesting because they're one of the only animals that actually functions like this, whereas all others have the bottom jaw moving. And so that's the cool thing about them. But that also means, like, that's the reason you can duct tape their jaws shut, because they don't have that strong of a force to open them up with. Anyway, so you look at their jaws, and they have only canine teeth, but technically they're not canine teeth because they're not mammals. But still, here, the ones in the back are actually growing in. These ones aren't as pokey looking. They're much duller. Whereas the ones in the front are much more stabby. And they're used for stabbing into things, making sure nothing leaves the mouth. Very pokey. Stabs right into the flesh. And then they swallow it whole. They're unable to chew, so they do death rolls to tear their prey apart. And then they swallow everything whole. And the other thing is, most mammals, carnivorous mammals, are unable to chew, so they also have to swallow everything whole. The jaws move up and down. They can't go side to side like deer can. And that's a major difference. And the last one here, oh wait, no, not the last one. I'll do this one. Okay, so a mouse skull. Really tiny. This one came out of an owl pellet. I glued it together. And so, basically, like a muskrat. Very small, though. Extremely small. And they have little incisors for chewing. Then their molars for grinding in the back. And eyes on the top of the head and facing towards the sides. Okay. And then last but not least, the jaws of a bull shark. So these ones are very different from other animals in the fact that the jaws are made from cartilage, which is not bone, but it's similar. It's bendable and stretchy compared to bone, which is just solid. And these teeth are serrated for tearing things, cutting into it. And then the bottom ones are spiky, and so if something gets in the mouth, it does not want it coming out. So these will hold it in and make sure nothing escapes to exit. And these ones are more like the ones on the top, but not quite. And these are curved, as you can see. And so these actually look, the bottom jaw looks like that of a mako, with mako sharks have a lot of really thin, pointed teeth like this. Tiger sharks have teeth that are even more curved to the side. Great whites have almost perfect triangular teeth with serrated edges. Let's see if I can move this closer. Doesn't want to focus. There we go. You can see they have serrated edges here. And like I said, that's for tearing. And the bottom teeth are spikes. And you can see, let me flip this around. In the back, they have a whole lot more teeth. Rows and rows that will slowly turn forward when one of the front teeth falls out. And this is really cool to look at. I just love this. You can see all those other rows in their mouth. I just think that's really awesome. Then the ones on the top also have a whole bunch more rows. You can see here, this one is actually moving forward because there's a tooth missing right here that fell out, one right here that fell out. And so these teeth are slowly turning forward to replace the ones that fell out. Yeah, I really like looking at shark jaws. They're really awesome. Okay, so I brought out 6 more skulls. So the first one is a red-eared slider. So it has forward-facing eyes, and its sagittal crest, also known as a sagittal keel, is fairly large. It sticks out way past the skull. And it has a sharp beak for cutting into fish and other prey items like that. Then I have a common snapping turtle skull with a hawk-like beak, which is very sharp and is used to tear into fish and other prey. And they'll eat pretty much anything they can catch, like snakes and frogs, fish, bugs, pretty much anything like that. Large eye sockets, really large sagittal keel, and small nasal cavity, and a very small brain cavity in here. But most reptiles have very small brains, and in this turtle you can see like it's like pea-sized or smaller. Next, I have the jaws of a cat shark, and this thing has tons of little teeth. They can have up to 110 rows in this species' mouth, whereas most other sharks only have 6 or 5. So there's really tiny teeth in there. Tons and tons of rows. And they eat squid and smaller fish. And those little teeth help to snag them, and they don't let the squid escape. They're very prickly, and they hold it in place and lock it so it can't get back out. Then I have the skull of a house sparrow, just the skull, no lower jaw. And you can see it was killed by an impact to the blow to the head. And very large eye sockets, very large nostrils too. However, most birds can't smell, vultures are some of the only birds that can smell, and that's so that they can find their carcasses, their carrion that they want to eat. Whereas all the other birds that can't smell, it means if you save a baby bird and put it back in the nest, the mom won't even recognize that you did it unless she saw. But even if she sees you saving the baby, she won't care. She'll still raise it. And that's the thing, people say that you can't do that or else the mom and dad won't take care of it anymore. But that's false. You can do that, and they appreciate the help, anything to save their baby. I've seen birds that are very concerned about their babies, and I saved them. Then finally, I have two more mammal skulls. So, this one is the skull of a 9-banded armadillo. And so you can see the eyes are almost facing backwards, which is really interesting. So they have monocular vision, and if you take a look at the teeth, they're very peg-like, very short, used for grinding. There's no incisors or canines, just these little premolars. And then last but not least, I have this cow skull, which you can see is very large because cows are very large. And so, large eye sockets, so pretty good vision, but not as good as some animals. Monocular vision, so they see sideways. A large nasal cavity. And you can see somewhat a sagittal crest here. Pretty good chewing muscles. They can chew side to side, whereas carnivores can't. And then look at the teeth. And you can see they're flat molars used for grinding and smashing up plants. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Bye.